Hello everyone, welcome to the Scotch Malt Whisky Society's first Friday pub session for March 2021. I'm Richard Gosselin, I am the editor of the Society's members magazine Unfiltered, and as usual I will be your pub landlord tonight. So yes, March is here. There's a wee hint of spring in the air and a wee bit more light in the evenings, and maybe a wee bit of light at the end of the tunnel that we've been stuck in for so long. But we're here to lift the spirits a wee bit tonight. I hope we've got a good evening of entertainment and whisky lined up. We're going to be catching up with Rachel McCormick, whisky writer and food expert, to find out about food and whisky pairings. We're going to be checking in with Fiona O'Connor, who is an Irish whisky writer and historian who's written an epic piece for Unfiltered magazine about Ireland's whisky renaissance. So we're going to be hearing more about that from Fiona shortly. And we're going to also have music and our usual pub quiz. So wherever you are, thanks for coming along. Let us know where you are. Let us know how you're doing. Let us know what's in your glass. I hope you're all in good spirits and doing okay. But first of all, let me introduce my co-host this evening. A well-known face for many of you. It's Ewan Campbell, the Scotch Malt Whisky Society's spirits manager, the man who's responsible for getting the good stuff into the bottles and into your glasses. So how are you doing, Ewan?
Not too bad, Richard. How are you? Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Yeah, all good. I can't believe it's March, and someone pointed out on Twitter, I think I saw, that it's actually exactly a year since the Glasgow Members Room opened up. Its initial launch party was exactly a year ago tonight. I don't know if you were at that one, but we were at the launch party for the industry. It was like a week later, I think.
It was on the 11th, I think it was.
Yeah.
So Wednesday, next week, I think, yeah.
Yeah. So to pay tribute, I'm virtually in the Glasgow Members Room tonight. For those of you that haven't been there, it's a fantastic place. The circumstances were unfortunate where it opened up and then closed down again, and then it's been kind of on and off ever since. But hopefully, it's not too long until we are back in there. But we're going to kick off tonight with some music, and we've got a young singer-songwriter from Glasgow, Jodie Knight, joining us. Jodie, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you, Richard?
All good. You ready to take us away with some tunes?
Yep, I am.
Right, Jodie, over to you.
Obviously, first gig I've done in a very long time, so thank you so much for having me.
No bother, you're welcome. It's all yours.
The first song I'm going to do is a song called Best Part, so I hope you guys enjoy it. Slowly, it's the sweetest thing, and it don't change. If I had it my way, you would know that's you are. You're the coffee that I need in the morning. You're the sunshine in the rain when it's pouring. Won't you give yourself to me? Give it all. I just wanna see how beautiful you are. You know that I see it. I know you're a star. Where you go to follow, no matter how far. If life is a movie, then you're the best part. You're the best part. It's the sunrise the desert. You're the Tylenol I take when my head hurts. You're the sunshine on my life. Yeah, I just wanna see how beautiful you are. You know that I see it. I know you're a star. Where you go, I follow, no matter how far. If life is a movie, then you're the best part. Ooh, you're the best part. If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Love me, won't you? If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Ooh, if you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Love me, won't you? Say something. This part. Thank you. That was a cover of Best Part by Daniel Caesar and HER. I see everyone's coming in from all over, so I hope everyone is well and staying safe during this crazy year. It has been wild for everyone, so yeah, I hope everyone's well. Next song is actually one that I wrote about the pandemic and just about how everything could get a little bit overwhelming and how we all just miss our friends and family. So this one's called Used to It. There's rain in my eyes, I can't see tomorrow. I guess I'll just sit and read my mind again. They're feeding me words I don't wanna see, I don't wanna live, but I can't escape this world we're in. It's like drinking water from a nuclear pool. 'Cause we've gotta live, but this life's no good. How I getting used to it. How it's scaring me to death. What's the point of this? I don't wanna be used to it. Used to it. I'm missing my friends like hell, you know. And I've been sleeping in, 'cause what the hell do I get up for? My new best friend is my bathtub. Thank God for wine and chocolate. What's this world? I don't know. It's like drinking water from a nuclear pool. 'Cause we've gotta live, but this life's no good. How I getting used to it. How it's scaring me to death. How I don't wanna be used to it. I getting used to it. It's scaring me to death. What's the point of this? I don't wanna be used to it. Used to it. Thank you. That one, like I say, was called Used to It. I'm sure everyone can relate to lots of stuff in that. Well, I hope you can. So I'm going to sing one more song before we move on to the next thing. And this is Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls. Forever to touch you, 'cause I know that you feel me somehow. You're the closest to heaven that I'll ever be, and I don't want to go home right now. And all I can taste is this moment, and all I can breathe is your life. Sooner or later it's over. I just don't want to miss you tonight. And I don't want the world to see me, 'cause I don't think that they'd understand when everything's meant to be broken. I just want you to know who I am. I just want you to know who I am. You can't fight the fears that ain't coming, or the moment of truth in your lies. When everything feels like a movie, just know you're alive. And I don't want the world to see me, 'cause I don't think that they'd understand when everything's made to be broken. I just want you to know who I am. I just want you to know who I am. I just want you to know who I am. Thank you so much.
Beautiful, Jodie. Thank you very much. That's got us in the right mood for a mellow evening of whiskey drinking and whiskey chat. So thank you very much. And we'll see you later on.
Thank you so much. Enjoy, and I will see you in an hour or so.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
Right, that's getting us in the right mood. Ewan, we just need to get into some whiskey after that wonderful music. March outturn out today. I think it's been successful. I know like some of the bottles were snapped up pretty quickly, but it's a very varied outturn. As usual, there's something there for everyone, and some kind of quirky bottlings as well. We were talking about what bottle to highlight in the pub session tonight, and we took a look at the 6857, which I think you've got there as well, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah,
really appropriate. Really appropriate after that fantastic set from Jodie there. It being called a newly built acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
it's pretty off the wall, this dram, and I picked it because I wanted to go for something that shows, how you can get really unique whiskies at the Society that you won't necessarily find the like of anywhere else. So, as you say, this is 6857. It's a 12-year-old bottled at 58.4%. And the interesting element here is that it's had around 3 years of additional maturation in a really experimental cask that we had custom built for us by a small cooperage in the southeast of Spain. And we were trying to play with different types of oak and heat treatments to see what the effect was on the spirit. So this is 70% New American oak and 30% European oak, and then we've given it a heavy toast. So let's dive in and see what we think.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing for me is definitely that wood impact is like right there in the nose, isn't it? It is like a kind of smack in the face with an acoustic guitar. Never mind just sniffing a new acoustic guitar.
Yeah, it reminds me of when you drop a plectrum inside the sound hole and you're like looking in the guitar, shaking it about, trying to get it out. It really reminds me of that kind of beautifully crafted instrument, acoustic guitar smell.
Yeah, with a bit of the stour coming out of the sound hole of the guitar, maybe a bit of that kind of dustiness you're shaking up inside it. Yeah,
but then the wood kind of goes resinous, which I think is coming from the European side, and there's all sorts of layered spices underneath as well. So you've got sort of the more familiar American oak giving you the toasty vanilla kind of custardy sort of thing, and then you've got the resinous spicy stuff. I get lots of barbecued banana or like butterscotch sauce as well, and then it goes for me as well to incense and kind of eucalyptus. I mean, there's all sorts going on. It's just a crazy dram.
Yeah, well, the tasting panel, I think it's on the tasting notes as well, called it immediately bonkers. But it is definitely a dram that deserves a bit of time and attention. And I think, as you say, it's something you just don't come across elsewhere in terms of that kind of interesting cask type, that maturation and that kind of character in the glass.
Just added a wee drop of water there, and it really freshens it up.
Mm-hmm.
Brings out more fruity. There's lots of like orange oil and star fruit and stuff in there.
Yeah, well, it's funky, but my goodness, what a character! We're also in Unfiltered, this new issue that's out today. You also contributed to a piece that we've put together on kind of singing the praises of unsung hero distilleries. Distilleries where the bottles might not be recognizable as single malt bottlings at all, but it's really part and parcel of what the Society does. I think that we don't talk about distilleries in any great shape or form. It's all about codes and numbers, but it's looking beyond the distillery name and digging out those treasures from distilleries where you might not know very much about the distillery, you might not know where it is, but there's some brilliant stuff out there which is not normally available as a single cask bottling.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just a world of discovery waiting to happen. If you only focused on one distillery but tried single casks with different ages and different cask types, there's a huge variety in there alone. But when you can go to 120 plus distilleries around the country, a lot of them producing only for blended whiskey, the quality is there. It has to be there, and it's. I think I said in the piece that we put together that Scotch is the hallmark of quality, And the industry has hundreds of years of collaboration and expertise. So the lesser known distilleries put that as much into practice as the best known brands as well. So it's really good to be able to explore different things that you might not find elsewhere.
Absolutely. Well, there's a vote of confidence from Angie Ball. Some of the best bottles from the SMWS are from the most underrated or unknown distilleries. I would certainly agree. And it's interesting, once you start delving into it, you realize that some of these distilleries that you don't really recognize the name, they actually play a huge role in internationally known blends. You know, the one that springs to mind for me from the feature is Distillery 6. Is a key ingredient in the William Lawson blend, which we don't know much about here, but internationally, that's a massive, massive blend in international markets. And Distillery 6, you just don't see it very much as a single malt, but it's a key ingredient in this very, very popular blend.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the one that we've tried there, 68. While you can get it as a single malt from the producer, it's it's lesser spotted, and it goes into a couple of their very world famous blends as well. So it's great to be able to see it in its kind of isolated form and get to know it a bit better.
Absolutely. I'm going to put you on the spot here. First, Phil's asking you, Ewan, the description of whiskey is funky. What does it mean? What does funky mean to you?
Well, I think I first really encountered it when I was tasting rums, and it can be like a kind of really fruity, estery note that is borderline kind of fermenting. So that's like one way that it can manifest itself. Our bottlings from Distillery 1 to 8 in Wales often have this beautiful estery funk that's similar to rum. But it kind of depends on the context that you're framing it in. If it's like a kind of farmy, peaty smoke, I would describe the farmyardiness as this kind of funk. It's almost like when it's a note that shouldn't really be pleasant, but it is that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think maybe everyone's got their own definition, but it's that kind of, I guess, prominent note which jumps out at you as, I think that's it. You might not expect to find it there. But yeah, it's certainly in rums. I know the Jamaican rums are famous for being a bit funky, but you also find that note in whiskey as well. Okay. Good stuff. Well, there's lots of. I know that some of the bottles sold out in the outturn this morning, but there's lots still there, and there are some quirky bottlings which deserve to be explored. So the 6857, absolutely, it's an intriguing one, and can only recommend it. Okay, let's introduce Rachel McCormack. She is the author of Chasing the Dram. She's a food writer and expert, and got a great gig to write about whiskey, exploring distilleries all over Scotland and pairing them up with food. You know, the book, Rachel, was obviously focused on whiskey, but you were coming at it from a foodie perspective, and there was a lot of recipes in the book as well. So thanks for coming in to the pub session tonight. Tell us a wee bit about the synergy of whiskey and food from your point of view. I guess you came at whiskey from a food background first. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, I think the thing with that I found was, because I spent most of my 20s in Spain, they have the word gastronomy, and there's this sort of idea of, if you like food, you like wine, and you like brandy. These things are not separate in a way that we have them very, very separate in the Anglophile world. If you know about food, you know about whiskey, you know about wine, and you don't really connect the three of them. The only overlap really would possibly be whiskey and beer. And my attitude to it was looking at, why have we never really taken off with having food with whiskey, or even cooking with whiskey? I mean, obviously, unless you're a millionaire, there are lots of SMWS bottles that I would not use in cooking because they cost quite a lot of money, and I would probably cry if I was pouring them in. But your kind of average household kind of blend is a really good addition to a lot of different types of cooking. But I think that the thing that I really noticed, now the book's been out about 3 years now, that has really begun to change is people are thinking about having whiskey with food, not exclusively maybe as an aperitif, as like a starter, or after dinner having like whiskey with cheese. But I do think whiskey can enhance food, and I think it's a really fun thing to do, to have a look at and compare food and have food with whiskey as opposed to wine. Sometimes it's maybe good to have like a whiskey and soda with certain things. Any kind one of the things that's really hard to pair with wine is really hot food, like curries, and whiskey goes really well with a curry. If you have a whiskey and soda with any kind of hot food, it is fantastic. So I sort of took the kind of book angle from that, was me looking at why we'd never done this and why we should start doing this. And so many food and drink traditions that you see in different countries have been going on for hundreds of years, and it turns out this big festival of whatever it is started in the 1960s. And I just thought, Scotland really should start a tradition of food and of whiskey and food.
Well, I think it's interesting because we talk about whiskey and food, but I've not had a lot of whiskey and food experiences. But recently, with the home dining kit, we've been doing home dining with our chef James Freeman, serving up brilliant meals, and we've been pairing them with whiskies. And for me, it's been a brilliant chance to actually have a whiskey which is specifically paired with each of the 3 courses. And I've had a couple of these home dining experiences, and it's enlightening actually when something is paired well as a whiskey with the food. It does really work. I think previously I thought it was maybe a bit of a gimmick, and am I really going to give up my wine in place of whiskey? But having done it with the home dining experience, it actually works.
See, I think again it's that whole idea of that extreme. You don't have to give up anything. You don't have to give up wine. You have to just have whiskey sometimes. You can have more fun. You can do, you can have wine in your food on a Friday and have whiskey in your food on a Saturday and have beer in your food on a Sunday. It's that level of extreme that I kind of found quite interesting. Of, you can't do this. Well, you can. You just don't have to do it every day. I mean, it was kind of the similar thing that I've found, because most of the, my book really wasn't for the whiskey geek. So most of the people that I was dealing with, and still do, are people maybe like a lot of your audience who are really into their whiskey. And they'd always kind of say to me, what's your favourite whiskey? Because if you tell me what your favourite whiskey is, I'll know the best whiskey to get and I'll get a shortcut. And I kind of wanted to go, this makes no sense. It's like, have one whiskey for the rest of your life. It's like saying you can have one meal for the rest of your life. Even if your favourite meal is steak and chips, by the time if you have to have that every single day for breakfast, lunch and dinner, you'll be fed up with it after a week. And it's the same, and whiskey has this massive range that you can have, and so does food. And so it's like an addition to your life that is fun and enhances your life would be to have whiskey with food.
Definitely. Any from your experience, any like do's and don'ts, just like basic knowledge about what's going to work and what should you steer clear of?
Well, one of the things I noticed with I did quite a few times different chocolate and whiskey pairings from different events, and what I found was I would just go to the pub with friends of mine. I wasn't there taste experts, but there were people that they could taste a whiskey, they could taste chocolate, and they had an opinion. And we found that tastes that are exactly the same don't really work. So if we had like a really light chocolate and an incredibly light whiskey, they just kind of didn't enhance each other. It's almost like they cancelled each other out. So you do need something that's a contrast. I mean, so someone's just saying that they finished a venison steak with a waxing lyrical highball. I mean, that's the kind of thing, steak, venison steak, beef steaks with a whiskey and soda is fantastic. I would say generally with a steak, you're better off with a slightly smoky whiskey, edging towards peaty than a sherry cask finish whiskey. One of the amazing things though is really good Iberico ham or really good Italian Sandanelli ham with a sherry cask finish whiskey. That is a lovely, lovely pairing. The only thing is that you just end up eating far more ham than you expected because it's such a good combination. Dry again with your sherry cask whiskey, salted almonds, really, really nice, really easy stuff. Also, anything again with whiskey, anything creamy. So if you've got croquetas or you've got that kind of creamy mozzarella cheese. So, but there's a friend of mine who has now taken it as his mission for the past year, because I had always said to him that you should really try whiskey and cheese, and he'd never tried it before. And the thing I always said was, instead of doing that very British thing of having port with Stilton, you should have a peated whiskey with your Stilton, and he loved this. And then so for the past year, because I've not seen him, I've been getting messages on Telegram every so often with a photograph of the cheese that he's got and the whiskey that he's got. And so the past year, he's told me that Deanston 12 is absolutely fantastic with cheddar. He said Talisker 10 with smoked cheddar is like mackerel and is absolutely amazing. And the other thing that he really loved was Glengoyne 10 and Lincoln Poacher. So I would say once you can get together with some friends, bring all your whiskey, get all your cheese and work your way around it. Have an evening working your way on cheese and whiskey, and then also get some charcuterie, get some really nice quality stuff, and then just go right round and see what you think. Because what you think will be maybe different to the person that's beside you, and you can find out what you like, it's just a really fun thing to do.
Absolutely. Well, we're getting some comments coming in from people with their own choice of different cheeses and whiskies. Ewan, any preference from your point of view?
I do love the blue cheese with a smoky whiskey example there. But I think the main thing I would take away is that there are no rules, and that you kind of, what is better than the suggestion there of getting all your friends, all the cheese and all the whiskey together, and just experimenting and seeing what works for your palate. Because I imagine the three of us would have a different favorite out of the selection as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the thing is I think if you're not a professional sommelier and your job isn't in taste, the point is what you like. And also, what you like in January might be different to what you like in June. And that's the thing. There isn't a definite. To me, there's not a definite. This is what goes, because for example, again with the blue cheese, I think what's really best is a peated whiskey. But if you don't like peated whiskey, then that's a waste of time for you. Or if you don't like blue cheese, it doesn't really matter whether they go together. If you don't like them, it's that thing of you can find this out and you can have really good fun. I mean, drinking. The thing I really learned from doing that, because I really didn't know that much about whiskey before I started, was how fun drinking whiskey is. My problem is that I now can't do another drink book, because everybody said, well, what's next? I'm like, well, what's better than kind of Scotch? What's more varied than Scotch? What's got better stories than Scotch? And everybody's like, well, nothing. And I'm like, well, there you go. So I need to do a book on something else. But what I found was that variety. If you can add to that variety with making things, or just bringing cheese, bringing really good charcuterie. The only thing that I would say is your quality has to match your quality. There's no point in getting your really, the cheapest honey glazed wafer sliced ham from the supermarket with some of your best whiskey. That's the only thing. Can try and match the same level of quality with your whiskey, and that will give you a really good time, and you'll really enjoy yourself.
Good advice. Well, talking about quality, we've got a couple of extra special drams tonight that we're just going to have a wee sample of. These are from the Vaults collection, which are the Society's, oldest, rarest, just best whiskies. I was meant to get a couple of samples as well, but they didn't make it to me in time. But thankfully, you and Ewan both got your samples. So I'll really leave it up to Ewan to dig into the Vaults collection samples and talk us through what you've got in your glasses.
Sure. So the first one we're going to try is the 35.270. Distillery 35 is a real society favourite, hailing from Elgin, and we see all different ages and styles from there at the society. So this particular one is 33 years old, still packs a bit of a punch at 53.3%. It's called At the End of a Perfect Day, which is quite fitting for a Friday dram, I think. And this one has 3 years of additional maturation as well. Also in toasted oak, but it's American oak only this time. And rather than being new oak, like the first dram we were discussing, this cask was used previously for 21 years for a full term maturation of another 35, which was 35.153, bottled in 2016. So you can kind of see the intricacy of some of the cask management there as well, that we've reused this cask, and the result is just brilliant. What do you think, Rachel?
I think it smells absolutely fantastic. Let me try a bit. See, that was made for the best Iberico ham. And now, if you go into like some supermarkets, you can get an Iberico ham for £30. It's not that kind of a ham. The ones that cost about £800 to buy, and it's just people they sliced really thin. That is made for this kind of whiskey, and you get. I would say you can smell raisins, kind of just very, very slightly.
Yeah, the tasting panel picked up things like figs and syrup, but you've got a touch of meatiness in there, sweet dates wrapped in bacon as well, and I think it's got this beautiful.
See, that's where.
Like kind of fattiness, nuttiness, like you would find in these kind of cured, acorn-fed hams, and a bit of Madeira or something like that as well. Very winey and rich.
That's absolutely.
We add a wee splush of water and see how we go. No pipette for me.
So what do you think water adds to this in general whiskey?
I remember hearing a well-known whiskey writer describing it in a really poetic way that stuck with me. That it's kind of like when when you can smell flowers really intensely just after rain. To me, it's kind of like that. It just brings a splash of life to it, disturbs the molecules or whatever a little bit, and just really brings it to life. So much more expressive fruit in this for me. Things like Cape gooseberries, quince jelly, that kind of thing, like quite exotic. Again, would be amazing with meat and cheese, with these kind of quince jelly notes.
That kind of perfume the taste that you get from quince jelly.
Yeah.
You can really smell it. It's almost soapy, but not quite. That sort of going to that level of kind of perfume.
Yeah, floral, kind of pressed flowers and things like that as well. I mean, there's just so much going on, and it's velvety smooth, just really silky texture.
You see, this whiskey isn't one that I would put with cheese, because I think this whiskey you would ruin this whiskey with cheese, unless it was a really soft kind of creamy burrata or mozzarella. But I wouldn't put this whiskey with a stronger cheese, because I think you would take away some of the nuance. But somebody else trying it could completely disagree with me, which is what I like about food and whiskey pairings.
Would something like a Crowdy work, like oat rolled and soft,
Yes.
creamy. Yeah, that'd be nice, I think.
Crowdy, burrata, mozzarella, something like that, and it would definitely work with Iberico ham. But I wouldn't put something older. I wouldn't put a more mature cheese, and I definitely wouldn't put a hard cheese with this. But again, I think it's what you're saying, because it's so complex. You kind of pair it with something incredibly simple.
Yeah, it can kind of fill in most of the flavors on your palate, and then you just kind of complement it with something. Beautiful.
Yep.
Should we try the next one now? So this one
now
here
for something
is
completely different, right?
Absolutely, yeah. This is 53.333. So this one hails from Islay. Again, another society favourite, this distillery. This particular one is 29 years old at 54.9%, and it's called Bandages on a Mermaid's Flipper, which conjures up an interesting image. And that and this one is full term maturation in a good old fashioned refill hogshead. And the thing that struck me about this is there's a lot of colour to it. So I imagine that it was still a fairly active cask when it was filled those 29 years ago. And for me, I love it when peated whiskey hits this kind of age, because they pick up these hallmarks of aged whiskey, like the kind of rancio, mushroomy kind of notes, but then they've got this mellow peat character as well. Yeah, that's pretty special.
See, Stephen, they're saying that 53 needs Stilton or Santagor, and yeah, you just smelling that Santagor would be brilliant with this.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking through the tasting panel's notes here. Got things like hazelnuts and chocolate marshmallows. I love it when you can pick out things behind the smoke, because peated drams are not just about the peat. There's lots going on in here.
It's got that taste that you were talking about earlier, like that sterkel taste. That I think what you were saying was funky, but in wine it's called the sterkel because nobody wants to say chicken chip, because that sounds terrible, but it's actually really nice. That farmyard smell would be. I think other people say the farmyard smell you get off wine. You get the same kind of farmyard taste from this. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I grew up in the countryside, so I'm very familiar with that. It brings back fond memories for me, actually. So,
but again, you see, if you're talking about food pairing, if you look at these two whiskies, I wouldn't put Iberico ham with this because they do nothing. I don't think they do very much together. Like really good quality charcuterie, and a whiskey like this, they don't do very much for each other. The smoke doesn't really add to the charcuterie taste in a way that I would put quite a strong cheese with this in a way that I wouldn't have put that with the other one. I think a strong cheese, you would bring out the complexity of the cheese and you bring out complexity of the whiskey in a way you wouldn't with the other one. And
so what
those
else
are my opinions just based on.
Sorry, I think we're lagging a bit here. What else apart from cheese would you put with that style of whiskey or this particular one?
This would go well with steaks, I think. Really well, I think, with venison steak or beef steak.
Yeah, I can see that. Good with loads of black pepper. I'm feeling chocolate mousse
with a oily. For sweet things, yes, chocolate mousse would be good. But smoky, what's not smoky fish? Oily fish like mackerel would be really good with this. If you've got a really good fresh mackerel, this would be a lovely thing to have. You know, when you get those properly really fresh grilled mackerels.
Yeah. Oh, I'm getting really hungry now. I did eat dinner beforehand as well.
Stephen saying a ribeye in the barbecue, that kind of thing. You know, that's what this would do really well.
Definitely.
And
Yeah,
again, a
two
thing
beautiful
is
drams.
that you just have to. It's a bit about concentrating. You know, like if you're just talking and you're not tasting, it's a different experience. But they are two really beautiful drams, and it's that whole thing about how totally different they go with completely different things, even though they're both essentially whiskey.
I will have to take your word for it, both of you, that they are beautiful drams. I'm positive they are. Hopefully my samples will make it to me at some point and I can just enjoy them in peace and quiet without the spotlight being on me. But yeah, a couple of spectacular drams. I think the Vaults collection is coming out on the 18th of March. So something to look forward to, but always just incredible bottlings from the darkest recesses of our collection. So brilliant. Rachel, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for thank you for sending them to me. These were an amazing thing to taste, and thank you for having me.
Great. Right. Cheers, Rachel.
Bye.
Right. Very good. Well, that wasn't much fun for me sitting there watching you two enjoy these brilliant whiskies. Let's move on. We have Fionn O'Connor standing by. Now, Fionn is a very well-known face, obviously, in the Irish whiskey world. He has written previously for Unfiltered magazine, but it's been a long time. I think 2014, Fionn wrote a piece about the Irish whiskey scene at that time, and we asked him to do another piece for Unfiltered this month, where he kind of revisits the Irish whiskey scene for our membership to read about. And I think it's safe to say a lot has changed, Fionn, right? Give us an update.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the article's gotten longer. No, actually, the first one was long too. So
it was pretty long. Yeah, they're both epics.
Yeah. So I still can't shut up, but a different kind of topic at least. So hopefully distinct. But yeah, I mean, 2014 there was less than 5 distilleries, and now the current head count is 38. So completely changed, utterly. Terrible beauty is born. As the man says.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess you were talking back in 2014 about the Renaissance was just beginning. So we're 6-7 years on. Where are we in terms of actually seeing the results of the whiskies that were being laid down at that time? So how's it going, I suppose, is the question.
The problem is, back then I kept telling people, the Irish whiskey renaissance hasn't really started. All the interesting stuff is being laid down now. And now, because there's new distilleries every other bloody week, I keep saying exactly the same thing, saying, you have to wait. The real renaissance is just, no. When these guys mature, that's when it's all going to spew out. But in truth, even at 6 years, not many of the people who started distilling 2015, 2016 have come of age yet. Only the first trickle, Dingle, a few others, Teeling, and even in Teeling's case, just a few of them. I would say the Irish whiskey renaissance is 3 years away, minimum. A lot of the exciting stuff is sitting in casks at the moment,
Sure. But it is exciting stuff. I mean, if I urge everyone to read your piece, which went out in Unfiltered online today, because you cast your net far and wide across Ireland. I think you give an overview, but then you spend time with 5 different distilleries, very different distilleries across the whole of the island in Northern Ireland, the south of Ireland as well, and kind of delve into what each one of them is doing, and the variety is very impressive. But there's a lot of, in order to look forward, they are very much digging into the past as well and kind of resurrecting this lost spirit, I suppose you could call it.
Yeah, well, it's odd, and I know I felt a kind of a moral obligation to write for you guys the first time around, because back then, first of all, Irish whiskey clickdom was such a small segment, minuscule segment of the whiskey world, really. And if we're talking about people who were, adorers of Irish whiskey, we're talking very small. And in Ireland, usually a grumbling crowd with a lot of purism involved. And it struck me, being attuned to the kind of, say, malt Scotch sphere or the bourbon sphere, so forth, and the presentation of Irish whiskey abroad versus the Irish whiskey fans I knew at home. And they were so out of tune with each other. They were so strange, because the way Irish whiskey was presenting itself abroad, and continues to a certain extent to present itself, was as a smoother, unsmoked, triple distilled equivalent to Scotch. And I mean, a lot of that historically is not very true, or at least in terms of personality. Irish whiskey kind of reinvented itself in the 70s, really in the 80s, and successfully in the 90s, from being a very oily, very heavy, very fusely, very back cut drink. Again, Irish pot still uses a lot of raw barley, which gives it that kind of, again, heavy texture. So in the 60s and the 70s, Irish whiskey was kind of on its knees, and then it came up with this idea to, first of all, switch to blends, and second of all, brand itself as light blended whiskey, and third of all, create whiskeys that would follow suit. And so even in the early 2000s, a lot of older Irish whiskey fans ignored the entire middle period and would just moan about the 1960s, and to a certain extent the early 70s, and then little hallmarks that reminded them of such, whether that be green spot or redbreast or whatever. And my worry in 2014, that recently, was that Irish whiskey would finally lose that touch with, again, that more aggressive, darker spirit that was known to certain whiskey critics and was known to obsessives at home, but had been kind of so completely cemented over by the new Irish blend of the 80s, and by 2014, the standard Irish blended personality, mixed with light malt that was coming out of Cooley, that was largely sourced in the kind of new arrivals. So I would read, gibberish put out, not just outside of Ireland, but often by ourselves, about what Irish whiskey was supposed to taste like. And if it tasted different to that, it was saying, oh, well, this is breaking from the old tradition of light and smooth. And, a lot of stuff, this is bullshit, and again, trying, at that time, I had just left Diageo. I used to work for Bushmills when Diageo owned them, and then the Classic Malts line. And I left to write a book about Irish pot still whiskey, which at that time was kind of an endangered animal, that raw barley malt concoction. And now, I mean, that all seems like ancient history. Now you have people reviving it up the wazoo, but you also have people reaching back toward, double distilled Irish pot still, which was truly extinct. The last double distilled mixed mash Irish pot still distillery was Cumber up in the north, and they closed in 1955. So it has become such an alien category. With the one hand, it is so strange. And yet, if you are a new distillery, and especially so many of the new distilleries are quite small, it's almost like they're pulling from behind the 80s to 2010 industry. And of course, IDL and Bushmills and so forth are all there. So they almost have to reach back. And the further back you go, there's this enormous well of, again, things like double distilled pot still when it still had oats in it, pot still when it still had rye in it. Irish pot still used to be muddy, strange stuff. And this survives in collector's items. So we're seeing that come out. We're seeing people muck about with it, saying, well, okay, if this is the old recipe, why don't I tweak it a bit? Why don't I peat it? Why don't I mix double and triple distilled whiskeys together? A la Springbank kind of stuff. So it is really a very, very young category at the moment. It's outside of its, bastion. It's going through a kind of a second adolescence. And yet what I was trying to get across in that article is the strange twitch on the shoulders of a lot of these young, very innovative, very cool producers looking back to a form of Irish whiskey that Irish whiskey itself, outside of very, very grumbling clickdom, kind of, not abandoned, but neglected, left aside for what in the 90s seemed like a kind of a sexy, cool, lightness. I mean, geez, the 90s were terrible for
Yeah,
a culture of all kinds, but drink especially.
yeah, I mean, but as you say, you're digging, or a lot of distillers are digging into the country's history to find out what that spirit was. And you've personally been involved in a distillation at Boan Distillery, right, where you used a historic mash bill. So what has come out of that so far?
Well, that's so. My day job is leeching off the taxpayer. I got funding from the Research Council to write a PhD on the history of Irish mash bills. So that's what I do most of the time. And a part of that PhD has always entailed the eventual recreation of a series of old mash bills, decimalized old mash bills, because they were working with sacks, so they kind of vary internally. In a controlled setting with the same cut points, the same flow rates, same yeast, same fermentation times, everything we can do to control other variables kept homogeneous, and to create a matrix of principles, because so much of this has disappeared. Things like oats, I mean, if you go way back in Scotch whiskey history, there's oats as well, but at least by the kind of Victorian era, oats had become a hallmark of what was considered Irish whiskey, Irish pot still. So much so that when it was done in, say, like Cameron Bridge and various lowland distilleries, even when they did it, they referred to it as pot still Irish. But it was as much a part of the heritage as raw barley. And of course, raw barley itself came very close to being kind of forgotten as a hallmark trait. So part of the dry part of the PhD is to track the trajectory of things like oats or wheat or rye, which again in tumbling order would have been of varying levels of importance at various points. And then finally, again, with these controlled recreations, to subject it to a blind panel of 30 head distillers. And we've got the panel lined up, and it was brilliant. I mean, we've got everyone from Waterford to IDL and back again. I mean, very small to very large. Because it was an academic project and because the offer was made, look, Boan own the liquid after it's done. But the information belongs to everyone. It's all the data goes out, and that'll be coupled with a GCMS analysis over at Heriot Watt out your way. And so they're the partners to the project, and they'll be working out a kind of an extrapolation, and they're helping with the questions for the sensory panel as well. So we can see, or hopefully we can see, if we can tag, say, if you pull raw barley up and take it out of oats, or pull raw barley up and take it out of malt, or push wheat up, etc. See if we can recreate the logic of a lot of this lost industry. Because of course, Ireland, I think Scotch whiskey has a very different relationship with the past. And I've said this before, because like, for instance, actually, I was using it as a computer prop just a second ago, but Alfred Barnard, when you open this book, what have we got? Literally, Bruichladdich, Islay. You see distilleries in here. Tobermory, again, they still exist. Now, I know Bruichladdich was revived, but, when you look at these old records, you see a certain pedigree, certain, longevity. And then you go to the Irish bit, and who have we got in Ireland? Coleraine. Coleraine closed in the 60s. Burr Distillery, they're gone. Ireland is a graveyard of its own lost industry, an industry that, and we love to say that, Irish whiskey outsold Scotch 3-1, etc. It was doing very well in the Victorian, especially the high Victorian period. But what we don't like to tell people is that whiskey was a very, very different type of Irish whiskey. And that story is often told as industrial history. And what I was trying to look at was culinary history, liquid history. How were those liquids made? Now, of course, we're using different types of still, even in the most subtle differences, worm tub condensers, etc., things that have changed. But how can we tag those principles when you have this enormous chasm behind you of what was lost? And does it belong to you? Does it not belong to you? Is it gone completely? And then you get these sprinklings of artifacts from the likes of Old Cumber or Old Powers, when Powers was an Irish pot still whiskey in the 60s. And you find yourself with an industry loaded with individuals who, again, feel a strange kind of ghost in the room that I don't think you find in young industries abroad, and you didn't find in Irish whiskey even 10 years ago, let alone, in 2014. And I think Irish whiskey right now is a very, very noisy space. There's a lot of white noise, and not everyone is doing, things that are as interesting as other people. It has to be said. But even if you take the most sincere, the most interesting, the most innovative, the most strange operations, and even the ones that aren't, concerned with the past, and there are a few of them that are very exciting as well. And like Waterford is really just doing what Waterford wants to do. They don't have the same relationship, say, Boan have. But all of this is even in a small, very thin cut of who to look at in Irish whiskey, astoundingly exciting. And I'm in a very unusual position, me and people who have access to those spirits, in watching all this stuff grow up, because the world is going to find out about this very, very soon, and nobody knows yet. And that's why, an increasing amount of my time is spent drinking new make, and because that's where all the excitement is. That and maturing stock, and it's a volcanic kind of subterranean well at the moment, and it's all going to come out roughly at the same time.
Well, we're looking forward to it, and I liked your description of, I think it was in relation to Blackwater in particular, but you were talking about a renegade creativity in relation to them. But it sounds like that's going on in a lot of places, obviously not everywhere, but there's a new generation which are being very creative and digging into your history. And as you say, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot to look forward to. So maybe we need to check in with you in another few years, just when some more of this whiskey is actually mature and ready to taste.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, maybe it'll all taste rotten, and then I'll, embarrassingly being not for so well, it all tasted grand as new make, but I have a suspicion it's going to be brilliant. The excitement, the resurrectionism, in Peter's case, the insurrectionism is amazing to watch. And even the combination. I mean, it's moved so quickly. Like, the idea with the thesis is to look at the past in a matrix or a set of matrices. But already you see people say, well, why don't I just take those oats and smoke them? Not the malted oats, the raw oats. Or we'll switch that and use the raw oats and the malted oats, because we're using both, and smoke the other. It has gotten so odd so quickly, and taking its cues from the past. But yeah, it is going to be an ironically very, very alien category soon, and yet result in a deep sigh of breath from generally elderly, but in some cases just young and grumpy people who have spent a lot of time in whiskey circles, pretty much absolute silence, bemoaning the kind of like old petroleum of True Powers pot still whiskey from 1962. So it is a kind of a conundrum.
Interesting times. Well, I urge everyone to read Finn's piece in Unfiltered. It is quite an epic. He's gone to town with the word count, but lots of good stuff in there, and dare I say, beautifully written. It's well worth everyone's attention. So cheers for that, Finn. I should say Ewan has had to leave the pub very suddenly because he's got another engagement, so he's off ski. I don't have anyone to do the pub quiz with me. Finn, you want to stick around and do the pub quiz?
Sure. Am I answering the questions? This is all,
You can help me ask the questions, and you can answer them as well. And there's quite an Irish theme to the pub quiz as well. So it was kind of inspired by some of the stuff that you've been writing about. So let me get
about articles. I don't remember any of that.
Let's see. Right. Let's give it a go. So the usual scenario with the pub quiz is multiple choice. We'll get 10 questions, and you can put your answers in the comments to see how you're getting on, but we'll give you the answers as we go along. So dead straightforward. And right, let's see. We'll kick off. Right. You want to just take this one, Finn? We'll take one question each.
Sure. Name the distillery. So what do I? Oh, do I guess it?
No. These are just the options that people have. They've got 4 options, so you can give them the options.
Ardnahoe, Ardnamurchan, Lag, and Nuchnian.
Right. So this is a test for you. I don't know how well you know your Scottish distilleries.
Well, considering that like 2 of those distilleries are freshly built, and we've been in lockdown for a year, barring travel.
There's actually a wee clue. There's a wee clue in the. Well, actually, it's very, very small, but the name of the distillery is written somewhere in that picture. But you need to have pretty good eyesight, I think.
Okay, well, I have terrible eyesight, but I also have a zoom in feature that shows me there's quite a long word there. So I assume it's Ardnamurchan.
Yeah, Stephen's saying C. Elam Irvin is saying A, but yeah, it's.
Well, Ardnahoe is quite close to the sea, so I imagine, I don't know if there's a big hill right in front of it blocking the view, but I say we were in lockdown. I was actually bizarrely enough brought out to Islay. BBC Northern Ireland were doing a documentary on whiskey, and there's a tiny little rib boat that goes from Ballycastle out to Port Ellen.
Okay.
And I was brought out to interview Jim McEwen, and he kept saying you have to see Ardnahoe right out onto the sea, but of course right out into the wrong direction. But I wouldn't suppose that looks out.
No, that's definitely not Ardnahoe. So the correct answer, I think most people, well, we've got a bit of a mix of responses, but yeah, the correct answer is, as you pointed out with your super eyesight, Ardnamurchan. And it's as you say, it's a new distillery, and there is a wonderful feature, dare I say it, written by me about Ardnamurchan Distillery in the new issue of Unfiltered out today, and a podcast as well with Alex Bruce. He's the managing director of Adelphi, which is the distillery owner. And Ardnamurchan, I should also point out, is the most westerly point on the Scottish mainland, so it's a long way from anywhere, and there's not much else around there, but well worth the journey. So we'll move on. Question 2. You got to ask this one as well, Finn. This is for you.
What makes Irish pot still whiskey different from Scotch single malt whiskey? There's a book in that, you know.
And you go with the options.
It's always triple distilled. It's made with the addition of raw unmalted grains. It's always made with oats. It's matured in bourbon barrels.
This is insulting your intelligence, but I don't know what the wider viewership is going to make of this one. If anyone was paying attention, they should already know the answer to this. But we can't write a book about it. So Julien is on the straight off with the B. It's made with the addition of raw and malted grains. Stephen's saying A, it's always triple distilled. Leslie's saying C, it's always made with oats. So maybe not as simple as you might think for a Scottish audience.
So yeah, it's made with the addition of raw unmalted grains. Raw barley being the big one, and then adjuncts in descending order. Doesn't have to be triple distilled. Middleton is triple distilled, but like for instance, what I'm drinking now is double distilled Irish pot still.
Yeah. But I think that comes back to the kind of myth that you were talking about of this smooth, light spirit, which was marketed.
Yeah, it's funny because again, it had, you know, there's an Irish pot still put into certain blends, you know, but it's put in the same proportions roughly as malt is put into blended Scotch. You know, it's very much a minority partner. Triple distilled Irish pot still is already quite oily. I mean, the most well-known being Redbreast, you know, quite thick stuff. Double distilled Irish pot still, you could, you know, again, like sit a pencil on, it's so thick. So it is quite a dense liquid, and then the other thing is very gingery.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. Question 3. What does Moynia mean in Bunnahabhain Moynia?
Is this to me?
No, this is to everyone, so don't give it away. This is. Are you a Gaelic speaker, Finn?
Well, Gael gan na hairan agam, mar
Okay. I presume this is the same or similar between
More or less,
Irish Gaelic and Scots Gaelic. So the options here are A, heathery, B, peated, C, salty, or D, smoky. Does it sound the same? Moynia?
For us, it would be Mona, but yeah, same word.
Yeah, okay. So let's see. Anyone taking a wee guess or knows for sure?
In fact, and this won't give it away, it's just bizarre. The energy board in Ireland is called Bord na Mona because of what it used to involve.
Well, there's Harry saying D, smoky. Leslie saying B. Andrew saying D as well, smoky. Okay, maybe not as easy as we thought. Roger's going D, smoky as well. Okay. Andy is saying B. Let's see who else. Julian B, Andrew B. Okay, so the answer is, of course, B, peated, and Bunnahabhain, of course, known as Isla's, unpeated malt mostly, but they do a peated expression known as Moynia, and we had a heavily peated Bunnahabhain in our outturn today, but I think it's already sold out, unfortunately. 10.207 wow wow woom. Very nice stuff. Okay. Question 4. You want to take this one, Finn?
A magical mystery tour was matured in a cosecha wine barrique. What does cosecha, or is it cosecha, mean? So we're in the wrong line.
Cosecha, I think.
Cosecha. A, grape variety. B, harvest. C, sweet. Or D, toasted.
Did you know this one?
Do I know it? No. Cosecha. I assume. Is it toasted?
Let's see. Mark's in with B for harvest. Andrew's also saying B. Anyone else having a go? Harry's going with toasted as well. Yeah. Stephen's saying A for grape variety. Yeah, so some mixed answers. Tricky. Oops, I'm way past it. The answer is B for harvest. Cosecha, basically, the word just translates as harvest, but it's maybe most often seen as in cosecha tardia, which is late harvest. And that is when the grapes are left on the vine longer in the season for sweeter, more intense dessert wines, which are known as late harvest. So cosecha tardia, I think, is the expression. Anyway, 13.86 from a cosecha wine barrique, which I think just means a late harvest, a sweet wine barrique in this case. Okay. Question 5. Who patented the 2-column continuous still? Was it Aeneas Coffey? I'm not sure if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was it Sir Anthony Perrier? Was it C, Heinrich Pistorius? Or was it D, Robert Stein? Okay. Now this is potentially a wee tricky one. Maybe not for you, Finn.
Well, coffee still is just, stains with a valve. But The question becomes who actually bothered to take out a patent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark and Stephen are both A. Harry's guessing D for Robert Stein. Roger's on A. Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly coffee is the name that is most commonly associated with the continuous still, right? But it's coffee was an Irishman. He patented it in 1830, I believe.
Yeah.
But it was adopted and embraced much more by the Scots than it was by the Irish, right? And that was really instrumental in the kind of growth of the Scottish blended whiskey market and the demise of the Irish pot still market, right?
Yeah, well, it's funny because there's one other side of the story that gets left out. We love to say Nias was kind of a stranger in his own land. Ulster does not get enough credit for adopting there were columns in Belfast and Derry, but they were so intricately bound with the blended Scotch scene anyway that they kind of got an extension. But yeah, he would have been the first in what was then the United Kingdom, the first extremely successful, entrepreneur of still design. Obviously, you get all the French ones beforehand, the Celia Blumenthal and whatnot. But
yeah,
like any inventor, he's the last rather than the first.
Inspired by others. Okay, question 6. What distillery? Oh, there's meant to be a picture of that because it's actually a picture round, so there's not much point in asking the question if we can't see the picture. Okay, well, no, we can't see the picture. We're going to skip that. Let's go to question 7. How many distilleries were operating in the island of Ireland in 1987? Is it 2?
The cheat sheet is right here.
3, 7, or 9? And this is, this is.
Oh, 1987. Sorry, I thought that said 1887. Barnes notes.
Yeah, no, 1987. I mean, this is we're talking about recent history, and it's testament to. I mean, I don't know what you said the number is at just now. Maybe it's like a bit like Scotland, where it's very hard to keep track of how many distilleries there actually are. But up in the 30s, high 30s.
38 as of now. That number is bound to change.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. We've got Ian and Leslie saying C, 7, Chesterville, D, Stephen, Roger, C. Yeah. The answer is 2, which it's kind of astonishing to reflect that in such recent history as 1987, there was 2 working distilleries in the whole of Ireland, north and south, and now we're up at almost 40.
It would be like, if Islay had more Port Ellens than it had anything else, when you talk about Irish whiskey, fandom in the 90s, that just everything is gone. The whole thing is a sob story, a basket case,
Yeah. Crazy. Right. You can take this one, Finn.
What piece of equipment in a distillery is this? Bonus point for the distillery name. A biomass boiler. B, a mash filter. C, a malt mill. Or D, a Saladin box.
Well, I know you're going to recognize this one.
Yeah.
It was part of the feature, so.
Yeah. Anyone else? Because if I say where it was, I'll just give it away. It was in the.
We'll give our audience a chance to have a look. Niles straight in there with Waterford, B for the mash filter. Stephen saying B. See if anyone else is having a go. Yeah, Andrew's B. So
yeah, the feature, reading it quickly. Find the page.
That's it. The correct answer is B. That's a mash filter, which I think is only really there at Waterford because they inherited or they bought the whiskey.
Yeah,
They bought it from Guinness, didn't they?
Yeah, so it's an old Diageo plant. So there's loads of stuff there, that they don't use. And then there's stuff that they use for, purposes that are much simpler than it's built for,
And it's quite rare in the whiskey world to use a mash filter. I think in Scotland there's only Inchdearney and Taininic use mash filters. Obviously, Inchdearney are a fairly new distillery, and they put it in on purpose. And I understand that it produces a higher alcohol content wash that goes into the mash, but requires a lot more work as well than just a mash tun.
There's a few of them in Ireland. There's, funnily enough, Boan have one as well. Again, Irish pot still, because it's much with other stuff is much lower yield, and especially if it's double distilled, But again, even that in consideration, they're not common.
Okay. Question 9. What is the result of using worm tub condensers on the spirit? Does that result in A, more copper contact, B, a lighter, fruitier spirit, C, less copper contact, or D, higher strength spirit? So using worm tub condensers, what is the effect? How's that in Ireland, Finn, in terms of the new distilleries using more traditional technology like worm tubs?
Yeah, in fact, I was having this conversation earlier today because Cologne have a worm tub condenser, and a few of the new guys, and of course, like in Scotland, they're a bit of an archaism, but here, you get people intentionally installing them, especially tiny little guys. But again, and I'm sure that happens in Scotland too. The revival of interest in things that were once considered antiquated.
Yeah, the answer is less copper contact. The worm keeps more of the sulfur compounds in the new make spirit, and that creates a bigger, heavier, sometimes a meatier style of whiskey. And we've got a whiskey in the outturn today, 48.121. It's called Worm Tub Hug, from Balmenach, a pretty old school distillery. And again, coming back to the point that it's a distillery you don't see a lot of single malt bottlings from, very, very rarely. But we've got a nice bottle from there in today's outturn, Worm Tub Hug. Okay, right. Last question. You might be relieved to know. You can have this one, Finn.
Which Scottish distillery did Mark Rainier manage before leaving to found Waterford in Ireland? A, Benriach, B, Ben Nevis, C, Bamore, or D, Bruichladdich?
Right. And again, I think we've already mentioned this tonight. I think it's come up in the conversation. But let's see. I think that's an easy one for most whiskey fans.
How many condensers can you, off the top of your head, in Scotland? What? Mortlock have one? Glenkinchie?
Glenkinchie, I don't think so, but there's quite a few, and actually the number is growing because some of the newer distilleries are choosing to put in worm tubs, like Ardnahoe on Islay. They've gone with worm tubs. Ballindellich up in Speyside also going with worm tubs. So it's certainly not something that's dying out. It's actually,
So again, revival of been a dying
very
brand.
much. Yeah. Old school technology. Yeah. Talisker and Edradour. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, there's quite a few, and certainly the number is growing. Okay, most people are going for D, Bruichladdich, which is the correct answer. Mark Rainier acquired the mothballed Bruichladdich distillery in 2000, and he sold it to Remy Cointreau in 2012. And then obviously he's taken his whole concept of terroir to Waterford in Southern Ireland. The Cathedral of Barley, I think he calls it, and it's like 46 different kinds of barley from specific farms that he's working with.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite astounding. The Cathedral is a very aesthetically pleasing name for it. It's again, I think it's said in the article, it's quite a brutalist looking space, but absolutely, it does segment barley into very, it's almost like it's beautiful because of the hard math rather than the other way around.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Okay, brilliant. Well done, everyone. Thanks for taking part in the quiz. Finn, thank you for stepping in and being my co-host quiz master.
No problem.
Great to see you. We're going to play out now with a wee bit more music from Jodie, who's standing by patiently, ready to go. So,
Hi.
Jodie, all set?
Yeah, I'm all set, all ready to go.
You're brushing up your whiskey knowledge now?
Well, I was just going to say that is probably the most difficult pub quiz I've ever seen. I didn't even have an idea of any of the answers.
It really does depend on your level of interest in the whiskey world, but we've got to play to our audience.
Is my knowledge?
Yeah, expanding people's vocabulary about words for bog in various languages. It's not a mainstay of the pub quiz scene.
Yeah. Right, Jodie, over to you. Take us away.
Thank you.
And you get a fast car. I wanna take it to anywhere. I said maybe we can make a deal. Maybe together we can get somewhere. But any place is better. Starting from zero, got nothing to lose. And maybe we'll make something. Me and myself, I got nothing to prove. And you get a fast car. I got a plan to get us out of here. Been working at the convenience store. Managed to save a little bit of money. We won't have to drive too far. Across the border and into the city. And you and I can both get jobs. Finally see what it means to be living. And see, my old man's got a problem. Live with a butter, that's the way it is. Said his body's too old for working. His body's too young to look like his. My mom went off and left him. Wanted more from life than he could give. It said somebody's gotta take care of him. Quit school, that's what I did. And you get a fast car. Is it fast enough so we can fly away? We gotta make a decision. Leave tonight, live and die this way. So remember we were driving in your car. It speed so fast, I feel like I was drunk. City lights stay out before us. Your arm felt nice wrapped around my shoulders. And I had the feeling that I belonged. And I had the feeling that I could be someone. A feeling I could be someone. You get a fast car. We go cruising and entertain ourselves. You still ain't got a job. I work in the market as a checkout girl. And I know things will get better. You'll find work and I'll get promoted. Then we'll move out of the shelter. Buy a bigger house and live in the suburbs. And you get a fast car. Is it fast enough so we can fly away? We gotta make a decision. Leave tonight or live and die this way. feeling that I belonged, and I had the feeling that I could be someone, a feeling I could be someone. And you get a fast car, I get a job, pays all our bills. You stay out drinking at the bar, see more friends than you do your kids. I'd always hope for better, I may be together, you and me Friday. Acting on plans ain't going nowhere. Take a fast car and keep on driving. Say keep on driving. And you get a fast car, it's fast enough so we can fly away. We gotta make a decision, leave tonight, live and die this way.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we have some Tracy Chapman fans. That is one of my favorite songs to sing when I'm busking. I normally busk in the streets, but obviously I can't at the moment. So that is normally one of my favorite songs to sing when busking. Such a great song. I'm going to do another original, and this one is called 334 Days. I'm trying to pick some upbeat ones because I do tend to write quite slow songs. So this is an upbeat one. I hope you enjoy it.
It's been 334 days and 5 hours since I've seen your smile, and I've been losing touch with everyone I used to call my own. I don't feel alright, 'cause I still see your face in every dream I dream, and I still feel you breathing on my cheek. And now I'm walking in my sleep, 'cause that's the only time that I can be like the old me. And you, I still living in my dreamland, subconscious place where we loved in those 334 days. Yeah. The other day I found your favorite t-shirt in the back of my drawer. It still fits the same. Do you still wear the bracelet that I gave to you on our last day? The one with both our names, 'cause I still see your face in every dream I dream, and I still feel you breathing on my cheek. And now I'm walking in my sleep, 'cause that's the only time that I can be like the old me. And you, I still living in my dreamland, subconscious place where we loved in those 334 days. Oh, our infinity in just 3 numbers. We could have loved each other, our love in technicolor. Oh, how I'll always wonder. And now I'm walking in my sleep, 'cause that's the only time that I can be like the old me. finds this place where we loved in those 334 days.
Thank you so much. If I've got time for one more song, then I do have one last one. If you want to stick around, this is another one of my favorite ones to sing. Kings of Leon, everyone knows it. Although I do see that there's a very widespread audience all over the world. I hope you have enjoyed this evening and have enjoyed the music. Thank you so much for listening. And this is going to be the last song, so this is You Somebody. I hope everyone's dancing and singing along at home.
Been roaming around, always looking down at all I see. Praying his face, this field of places I can't reach. You know I could use somebody. You know I could use somebody. Someone like you, and all that you know, and how you would speak. Countless love is undercover on the street. You know I could use somebody. You know I could use somebody. Someone like you. Oh, 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 hey. Someone like you. Oh, 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 hey. Someone like you. Hey, hey. Someone like you. Hey, hey. I was off in the night, but I'm living it up. I'm off to sleep, waging wars that shape the poet and the beat. I hope it's gonna make you know this. Said I hope it's gonna make you know this. Someone like me, oh, 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 hey. Someone like me, oh, 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 hey. Someone like me, hey, hey. Someone like me, hey, hey. Roaming around, always looking down at all I see.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Brilliant, Jodie.
having me
Thank you
on.
very much. Loads of great comments coming in. Amy's just asking her if you're on Bandcamp. She spotted a song called Fears. She's wondering if is that you?
I do actually feature on that song. I'm kind of doing backing vocals. It's not my song though. I might be on Bandcamp. I don't particularly use it, but I am on Spotify, and obviously Instagram and SoundCloud and everything. It's just under Jodie Knight. But that song Fears isn't mine, but I do some kind of backing vocals at some point in the song. Yeah.
Brilliant. Good stuff. Well, great to have you in the pub tonight, and bringing a bit of joy into our lives. So thank you, Jodie, and I hope to see you maybe in the Glasgow venue once we're back up and running, and get some live music in there as well. So thanks, Jodie. All the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Cheers. Right, folks, I think that is us for this evening. Just remains to me to say thanks to Jodie, thanks to Rachel, thanks to Fiona and O'Connor, and thank you to Ewan Campbell for all the whiskey chat and everything else tonight. That was brilliant. A reminder that there's a new Unfiltered out. There is a new podcast about Ardna Murchan. Check that one out. Home dining is available. We've still got Step Into Spring, I think, up until the 13th of March. And it's Mother's Day on the 14th. So there's a bit of time to get your order in for your dear old mother on Sunday the 14th. And then I think it becomes the Wild Garden, which is more about foraging from the 18th to the 27th of March. Virtual tasting, I should give that a shout out. March the 18th. Mads is going to be hosting with John McShane and Les Harrow, talking through a really good selection of drams, £35 for the tasting pack, and a really good lineup of whiskies. So I think there's still some available. Check it out, get online and take part in that. One more thing, venues are open as bottle shops, so check out their opening times to see when you can order a bottle and go and pick it up. Even if you can't go into a member's room, you can get whiskey from them. And they are also doing dram packs. I believe you can get a 3 or a 5 dram pack from the current outturn, and a 3 dram pack is £15 and a 5 dram pack is £25, and they will post anywhere in the UK. So you just need to phone the venues to order that. So lots of stuff going on, and without any further ado, that is it for me for this evening. I raise a glass to everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope you had a good time. Great to see you. And Slange, cheers.